Hello, welcome back. My name is Ari. This month we're doing 31 days of bookish content, and today I am talking about my surprises and disappointments of the year. So this is going to be 5 books that I didn't think I was going to like, and I was kind of surprised to find out that they were really good, and then 5 books that I really thought I was gonna like that I was hugely disappointed in. Let's start with surprises, and the first book I want to talk about is Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk. Now, I had read The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk last year, didn't particularly care for it, but this was a short book. I had an audiobook copy of it. I was like, you know what? The premise sounds really interesting. I'm gonna give it a try, but I'm expecting like nothing from it. I expected to just be okay with it or kind of disliked it, and this is a really good story. This is like a historical fantasy. Magical detective has basically sold her soul to the devil. You don't really know why, but you know it separated her from her family and that she's going to die soon because something about selling your soul, you only have so many years to live. Whatever. But you know she's gonna die in a couple of days, and that she hasn't told her girlfriend, and then she gets the chance to redeem her soul in exchange for finding a killer. So she only has a couple of days to figure out who this killer is, and that's it. That's the plot, and it was fantastic. I listened to it as an audiobook. The audiobook was great. It's a really short, it's like 130 pages. It's a really short novella. Definitely worth your time to pick up if it sounds even at all vaguely interesting to you. Next, I want to talk about some disappointments, and I'm going to just talk about 3 of them in a row because I read all 3 of these for the same video, and I didn't like any of them. Basically, I put a video that I'm going to link up here somewhere that was like books that are going to make me a vegetarian or something like that. And I was like eating vegetarian for a week and reading these books. And they were just kind of horror stories about gross things with meat, or just gross things in general. The Vegetarian by Han Can was one of them. This is a Korean story that's been translated. Basically, this woman just decides to be a vegetarian because of a bad dream, and her family is like super not supportive of it. It didn't give what I was looking for, and the story was just like, this is about familial abuse and mental illness. Like, I'm pretty sure the main character is bipolar, and it was just weird, and it made me uncomfortable, but not in a good way, and I was expecting to really love this and just didn't give. Same video, I read Tinder is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. It's like a future thing where humans are meat product because people really crave meat, can't eat animals anymore, so they turn to humans. For me, this was like I couldn't suspend my disbelief in here, because I can't imagine a world where, no matter how good the marketing is, that people are willing to eat other humans, like knowingly eat human meat, instead of just eating the plant-based meat products that we have. Like, there's so many plant-based meat products that exist now that taste just like meat, that I can't fathom willingly eating human meat, no matter how much you want meat. And like knowing it's human. I could see if you could, like a Soylent Green thing where you don't know it's human, but this one, like, people know it's human meat. Is ick. I also didn't like the main character in this. He had a very COVID denier vibe going on to him, and like, I know the book was written before COVID existed, but it was a little too real with this COVID is a conspiracy thing that this guy had going on. That I just, it it didn't do it for me. The third book in that vlog was The Troop by Nick Cutter, which, like, Boy Scouts on an island, and this disease breaks out on the island where it causes, like, insatiable hunger. And so I thought that this book was going to be like body horror about just eating and eating and eating and icky gross things that you're eating, and that wasn't really the horror part about this. There was some of that, but it was overshadowed just by how fucking awful these kids were. Like, all of these boys were just awful human beings, and I just didn't want to read about, like, I didn't want to read about it. Like, serial killers in the making, rapist, like, there's no enjoyment reading about awful teenage boys. Since we've done 3 of the disappointments, let's switch back over and do a couple of the, like, hey, I really enjoyed this. The People's History of Heaven. I got this in a book box and I was like, oh no, I don't like books about religion. I don't know that I want to read this. I ended up giving it like 4 stars, I think. It's about a tight-knit community in a slum in Bangalore, and they call it heaven, kind of, I guess, as a joke, because it's not, it's a slum, and it's not really about religion at all. It's basically about just women surviving together without men in a country who men control everything. So it's very uplifting, it's very lovely. I like very, very much enjoyed this book. It was sad, but it was also like just a lovely story of women being strong together. So not at all what I was expecting with religion. Ended up being great. Highly recommend if this sounds at all interesting to you. Another book that I didn't expect much of was Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keith. This is the story of the Sackler family. They created like oxycodone and made an entire drug empire out of addicted opioids, right? This I read because it was on the Goodreads Choice Words. I think it won one of the nonfiction categories. So I was like, oh, I'm not really interested in reading this, but okay. This is actually a really good story. It's a very like story-driven nonfiction. So it sounds like a fictional story and how it's told, but it's all like nonfiction to an extent. There's some things where it's talking about like what people are thinking that the author has no way of knowing, and it's just assumptions, but the way it's told feels like fiction. So it flows really well. It's very interesting and horrific at the same time, but if you're interested in this at all, this is a really, really well told nonfiction that feels like you're reading fiction. Next up, back to disappointments, and I've got The Awakening by Kate Chopin. This was on my 5-star predictions this year, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was fine. It's basically a woman born in Kentucky, marries into a Creole family, and she hates everything about everything. She's just miserable with how her husband treats her, but instead of like having a conversation with him, she's just like, I hate all these Creole people, I hate everything. She's childish and overdramatic, and it's boring. Act like an adult. That's all I gotta say. So yeah, definitely disappointed in this because I expected to give it 5 stars, and it definitely was not a 5-star read. Next up, one of my surprises is The Sheep Farmer's Daughter by Elizabeth Moon. Never heard of this book. My best friend was like, hey, you should read this. I think it was a prompt for my TBR game where he got to pick a book, and this is the book he picked, and I'm like, what the hell is this thing? Oh no. This is really good. This is high fantasy with a main female character written by a female author. And this is from like the 80s. And it's wonderful. Like, where was this when I was a teenager growing up looking for like female representation in high fantasy? It existed. I just had never heard of it. So I definitely would recommend this for your like teenage daughter who is looking for female representation in high fantasy, especially classic high fantasy, because this 100% gives it to you, and it's so well written. I loved it. It's typical high fantasy, it just happens to have a female character. Alright, let's do the last surprise. I'm gonna save the last disappointment for last because it is controversial. It's controversial, y'all. Alright, my last surprise is Coming of Age in Mississippi by Anne Moody. This is an autobiography about a woman who grew up in Mississippi, and when she was in college joined the civil rights movement, right? She grew up poor and black. Mississippi joined the civil rights movement in college, and this goes from her earliest memories to graduation from college, and it's an autobiography. This woman is a fantastic writer. She's a beautiful writer, and this is another one of those stories that is written like fiction, told in a story format, like plot and everything, but it's nonfiction. It's an autobiography. This one was really cool to me because this is the first story of civil rights that I've read from a woman's perspective instead of a man's, and from somebody who wasn't a civil rights leader. She was just an everyday regular activist with no protection of like fame or anything like that. So it was really, really interesting. A great like alternative look at civil rights history and racism in like the 50s and 60s. Highly recommend. Very easily read. Like I said, it reads like fiction, but it's nonfiction. Pick it up. All right. So my final disappointment, which is controversial, I know, and I did not rate this low. This is like a 3-star book for me. It's not a bad book by any stretch of the imagination, but it's Babel by R.F. Kuang. So the point of this story, where it's like talking about imperialism, racism, all of that, fantastic. The purpose of the story, you can't fix hatred by being nice to somebody plot of this story, amazing. I don't like R.F. Kuang's writing. I didn't like the story, like the plot. I liked the message. Bored out of my mind with the plot. Message, great. Read this book. This has an important message that you 100% need to know. I wanted to sleep the whole time. I just don't like R.F. Kuang's writing. It's the second book I read by her. I read The Poppy Wars. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't like amazing. Same thing, where it's like the message in this book is amazing. The plot, I can't get on board with. Same with this one. So huge disappointment, because I know everybody loves this, and I'm definitely not telling you not to read this. This is a personal thing where I just don't like her writing, but I love what she's writing about. I got nothing else to say. Anyway, those are my surprises and disappointments for the year. Tomorrow, you get the best books of the year. I'll see you there for that. Bye.